The first carton of milk is sold at a very low price. But after that, the price goes up fast, sometimes by 275 or even 300%. Mexico is working hard to increase its own milk production. At the same time, the United States keeps complaining about Canada's dairy policy, calling it unfair. But here's the surprise. Canada just made $3.2 billion by replacing the US in Mexico's dairy imports. And this happened quietly, without a big announcement or press conference. Mexico, once one of the biggest buyers of American milk, has quietly stopped buying. The gallons of milk that once came from Wisconsin and Ohio into Guadalajara and Mexico City are gone. Now Canada is stepping in with cleaner supply chains and stricter standards. And with something the US is losing quickly: trust. For American dairy farmers already struggling with tariffs, drought, and high costs, this is not just bad news. It's a heavy blow. So why did Mexico, America's closest neighbor and trading partner, stop buying US milk? Why now? And why Canada? Is this just a short-term change? Or the start of a bigger shift in who Mexico trusts to feed its people? And more importantly, is this how a superpower loses its seat at the agricultural table without even noticing? Let's break it down. America's dairy exports once ruled global markets. In 2023, Mexico alone bought $2.32 billion worth of US dairy. That was about 1/4 of total US exports. But on February 4, 2025, President Trump put a 25% tariff on Mexican imports. That move shook the long-standing trade relationship. From January to March 2025, the value of US dairy exports fell by 0.5% compared to the year before. Cheese exports to Mexico dropped by 5% in volume, even though global demand for cheese was rising. That drop was the first big fall for any major US dairy product in years. It showed how fast old markets can collapse when politics get in the way. While the US stumbled, Canada moved in quietly. In 2024, Canada's dairy exports to Mexico jumped from $2.86 million to $4.78 million. That's a 67% increase. The number is still small compared to America's billions. But it shows how relying on just one trade partner can backfire. When policies change, even strong markets can disappear. Mexico's shift was not only about money. It also showed concern about supply chain security and product quality. New government rules in Mexico now favor suppliers with stronger systems and reliable standards. This means Mexico doesn't want to depend too much on the US anymore. Washington can no longer assume loyalty from its biggest dairy customer. Meanwhile, US farmers face shrinking exports and rising costs. For farmers in Wisconsin, Ohio, and California, this means smaller profits and more uncertainty. Experts warn that the US must act fast to protect its dairy industry. That could mean new trade deals, better supply chains, or stronger negotiations. If not, other countries like Canada will keep gaining ground. The global dairy market is changing quickly. America's advantage is no longer guaranteed. If US leadership weakens, other countries will step in fast. The era of America's uncontested dairy dominance may be ending. Now let's see why Canada's milk exports keep growing. On January 10, 2025, Canada passed a new national code. It requires all dairy herds to be fed plant-based rations. It bans growth hormones and limits long-term use of antibiotics. Canada's new dairy rules started a new era of agricultural ethics. By April 2025, Canada launched Pro-Action Traceability with Dairy Trace and Simply Trace. This system records every animal's history. It links every drop of milk to the exact farm it came from. This gives importers full confidence in how milk is made and how animals are treated. By May 2025, U.S. dairy farms were still using old tracking methods. About 80% of added ingredients had no electronic records. That made U.S. milk less trustworthy. Because of this gap, American shipments faced more scrutiny. In June 2025, Mexico rejected a U.S. milk shipment because it did not meet Canada's higher standards. That single rejection cost millions of dollars. Mexico's move shows how animal care and transparency now affect trade decisions. For U.S. farmers in Wisconsin and California, the message is clear. Big volume is not enough anymore. Buyers want proof of ethical sourcing and supply chain clarity. Experts warn that if the U.S. does not upgrade its systems, it will keep losing markets. The industry must improve traceability and animal welfare. Otherwise, more customers will turn away. This shows a bigger change in world food trade. Transparency and ethics are no longer optional. They are required. Canada's model shows a clear path to export success. It is also a warning for countries that ignore supply chain integrity. Mexico was once America's most reliable dairy customer. But in early 2025, U.S. dairy shipments fell by 0.7 billion pounds. Higher tariffs and duties cut demand. At the same time, Canada raised its standards. In January 2025, Canada banned growth hormones and routine antibiotics. By April, every shipment could be traced back to individual farms. In June, Mexico publicly rejected U.S. milk because it failed to meet these ethical standards. That one decision cost millions of dollars. It also showed that ethics are now more important than volume. By late May 2025, Mexican shoppers said they are willing to pay more for transparent products. Young consumers now ask about what cows eat, pasture access, and hormone use. Canada provides digital records and clear labels. The U.S. still relies on old lot-based tracking. This leaves American farmers at risk. The impact is being felt across the U.S. from Wisconsin creameries to California dairies. Margins are shrinking. Rising costs threaten many farms. Trust has become the new currency in the dairy market. The U.S. must act fast if it wants to win back lost ground. Small towns and rural communities that depend on dairy exports face deep uncertainty. Lawmakers in Washington must now balance politics with real trade solutions. If not, Canada's billion-dollar deal with Mexico will remain untouched. The fight for dairy dominance has turned into a battle for trust. And America is falling behind. Across the U.S., barns are going dark. By mid-2023, the number of licensed dairy farms dropped to just 26,290. It is a chilling reminder that America's dairy backbone is breaking. One family farm at a time. Farming was once the heart of American life. Today it is fading quietly. Not because of scandal, but because of silence. The federal government has low approval among farmers. Only 30% give it a positive rating. This shows why many producers feel abandoned. Loan defaults are rising as costs keep going up. Feed, labor, and equipment prices have all increased. But revenues have not kept pace. Milk prices remain unstable. They swing up and down with tariffs and global trends. Small dairies are struggling with margins disappearing faster than dry fields. In Canada, small dairies are more stable. For over 15 years, they have been protected by price insurance and strict production quotas. This stability has kept barns full and rural communities strong. In the U.S., barns are often empty. Investors avoid risky farms with high debt and uncertain returns. Family farms that lasted for generations now sit abandoned. Mexico has noticed these problems. Its importers are choosing Canadian milk for reliability and ethical guarantees. U.S. producers risk losing long-term partnerships. Experts warn that without change, the crisis will get worse. America's dairy belt could shrink even further. Rural towns that depend on dairy are facing an uncertain future. Leaders in Washington must choose between empty political talk and real solutions. The clock is ticking, and farmers' livelihoods are at risk. For small farmers, this is not only about income. It is also about losing identity and community. Mexico once depended heavily on American milk. But that trust is weakening. Rising costs and new regulations have disrupted trade flows. When President Trump introduced new tariffs, dairy trade between the U.S. and Mexico became unstable. Costs went up, and buyers pulled back. Exports slipped even before retaliation measures took effect. Meanwhile, Canada moved ahead. In early 2025, Ottawa banned growth hormones and tightened antibiotic residue testing. Their Pro-Action traceability program lets importers track every jug of milk back to the farm. This transparency became a strong selling point. Trust itself now carries value. Mexico and other buyers are willing to pay more for it. Back in the U.S., the impact has been brutal. Family dairies continue to shut down. Empty barns and closed facilities now mark rural landscapes. Communities lose revenue and people move away. Mexican consumers are not just looking at price anymore. They want to know how cows are raised, what they eat, and if antibiotics were used. Young shoppers especially care about ethics, not just cost. Canada has responded with honest labeling and digital records. Even if they sell less, they earn more by charging higher margins. The U.S. still relies on old tracking systems. These cannot prove individual animal welfare. This is a major weakness. The lesson for Washington is clear. In today's dairy wars, transparency wins. Volume alone does not guarantee markets. Producers who fail to match Canada's traceability will keep losing ground. America must upgrade its ethics and visibility or face repeating the same failures. Mexico's new dairy pact with Canada is not just another trade deal. It is proof that the game has changed. The U.S., once the leader in North American milk, is losing ground. And what it is losing cannot be replaced with technology alone. It is trust. The question is not how much milk America can produce. The question is what story it can tell behind every jug. Will U.S. dairy leaders change their practices and rebuild trust? Or will they rely only on volume and keep falling behind? What happens next could reshape trade deals and redefine the bond between farmers and families. So the final question is this: what would you choose for your table? A cheap carton, or milk made with respect?